Exactly! Oh, hey everyone, welcome back to our show.
We are already having way too much fun in the studio today to join us.
That's right, so grab a drink, get comfortable, and conversation.
You know, if you hand someone a detailed, comprehensive safety manual on how a parachute works,
Right.
and you, ensure they pass a rigorous written test on gravity, terminal velocity, the mechanics of the ripcord, all of that.
Sure.
And then they still jump out of the plane without actually putting the parachute on.
Yeah, you would probably call them crazy.
Exactly. You call them completely crazy. But if that person happens to be 15 years old, developmental neuroscientists wouldn't call them crazy at all.
No, they wouldn't.
They would just call them perfectly normal. So welcome to today's deep dive. I'm so glad you're joining us for this one, because our mission today is to trace the biological journey of the human brain.
Yeah, specifically from early puberty into adulthood.
Right. We want to uncover the actual mechanical reasons teenagers take wild risks. And perhaps more importantly for you listening, we're going to explore why almost everything our society currently does to try and stop them is, well, it's completely wrong.
It really is a journey into some of the most complex asynchronous development in all of human biology. I mean, we are finally moving away from looking at adolescence as some sort of behavioral glitch or, a societal problem to be solved.
Yeah.
And we're finally understanding it as a highly specialized, deeply necessary biological phase.
Here, to map this out for you, we are pulling from top-tier developmental neuroscience and psychology research today. We have a major comprehensive review from Temple University on cognitive processing.
Which is fascinating, by the way.
It really is. Plus, we've got some incredible structural insights from the University of Barcelona on what they term the triangle of adolescence, and detailed neurological studies on the physical rewiring of the brain. And of course, to help synthesize this massive mountain of brain science into something you can actually use, I've got a resident expert across the table.
Glad to dive in. I mean, the science we have now fundamentally changes the landscape of how we should be guiding young adults.
Absolutely. So before we look at the actual biology, we need to look at what we're currently getting wrong. I mean, if teenagers aren't actually delusional about their invincibility, it really calls into question why we spend billions of dollars, and I mean literally billions, every single year on things like driver's ed, abstinence-only education, and DARE programs.
We do, and the outcome data is just staggering when you look at it globally. I mean, despite all those billions spent, over a third of high school students report not using a condom the last time they had sex.
Wow.
Yeah. Nearly 30% report riding in a car with a driver who had been drinking. More than a quarter engage in binge drinking or regular smoking.
Right.
So these educational programs, they cost taxpayers vast sums of money, but systematic research reviews consistently show they completely fail to change actual behavior.
Okay, let's unpack this because, wait, don't these programs fail because teenagers just lack basic adult logic?
No, actually.
I mean, we always just assume their brains can't process statistics or that they have this deep-seated delusion that bad things only happen to other people.
And that's the big misconception. The data from the Temple University review proves that assumption is entirely false. Adolescents do not lack logic.
Really?
Yeah. If you sit a 16-year-old down in a quiet room and test their logical reasoning and their basic information processing abilities, they score virtually identically to adults.
Huh.
They don't suffer from delusions of invulnerability. Studies actually show that teenagers frequently overestimate the statistical danger associated with various risky behaviors, just like adults do.
So they know exactly how dangerous it is.
Yeah.
They are perfectly aware that the parachute is necessary.
Yes. Standard classroom education is highly successful at changing what teenagers know. It just simply fails to change what they do in the real world.
Oh.
Researchers refer to this as the difference between cold cognition and hot cognition.
Cold and hot cognition.
Right. In a cold, calm classroom setting, their logical reasoning is basically flawless. But out in the world, in a hot, emotionally charged environment, that knowledge is just overridden.
Okay, so if they had the knowledge intact, why do they still jump out of the plane? What is physically happening in the brain to override that logic?
Well, the override is being driven by the onset of early puberty, and specifically a massive structural transformation in the brain's reward center.
Which is what exactly?
The dopaminergic system. Around puberty, dopamine receptors undergo this dramatic remodeling. Deep in the brain, there is an area called the striatum, which is heavily involved in reward seeking.
Okay.
During early adolescence, the dopamine system regulating this network essentially loses its internal thermostat.
A thermostat?
Yeah.
How does that work in the brain?
So in childhood, you have dopamine autoreceptors in the prefrontal cortex. Think of them as a negative feedback loop.
Right.
If a room gets too hot, the thermostat kicks in and shuts off the heat. In a child's brain, if a stimulus gets too exciting, these autoreceptors help regulate and dial down the dopamine release.
Okay, that makes sense.
But at the onset of puberty, those autoreceptors temporarily disappear. The thermostat is basically ripped off the wall.
Meaning the brain is just flooding with dopamine without any regulatory shutoff valve.
Exactly. And without that inhibitory control, potentially rewarding stimuli are experienced as intensely physically more rewarding.
Wow.
Adolescents develop a massive increase in reward salience. A new experience, a thrill, a taste of independence. It feels significantly better to a teenager than it does to an adult. They are biologically wired to seek out sensations because the chemical payoff is just so high.
But, I mean, is this just a case of raging pubertal hormones making them act crazy?
Yeah.
That's always the cultural narrative, right? We just blame testosterone and estrogen.
We do, but the neuroscience reveals a very clear distinction there. While this dopamine remodeling happens at the exact same time as puberty, it actually occurs independently of gonadal hormones.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Studies on animals demonstrate that even if gonads are removed before puberty, meaning you remove those sex hormones entirely, the brain still undergoes this exact same dopamine receptor proliferation.
Yeah.
And the loss of that buffering capacity. It is a pre-programmed biological clock.
But why would nature program a biological clock that basically guarantees a 14-year-old is going to want to take massive, potentially life-threatening risks? I mean, it seems like a terrible survival strategy.
Well, it looks terrible today, but if we look at it from an evolutionary perspective, this sensation-seeking was historically a brilliant survival strategy.
How so?
Imagine our ancient ancestors leaving the safety of the natal unit, the family cave, or the tribe's primary camp to venture into uncharted territory is inherently dangerous, right?
Right, yeah.
Running across a burning savanna, fighting off predators, crossing a swollen river, it all involves immense risk.
But staying put means you deplete your local resources.
You deplete resources, and most importantly, you risk inbreeding. If the adolescents don't leave the nest, the genetic line fails.
Oh.
So evolutionary pressures favored individuals who experienced a massive biological urge to seek out new sensations right at the age of sexual maturity. It gave young humans the necessary chemical drive to leave the safety of their parents, survive in new environments, and find new mates.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because the brain is basically turning up the volume on rewards to the absolute maximum to ensure they take the risks necessary to push the species forward.
Exactly.
So the engine is revving up because of this ancient biological mandate. But that brings us to a crucial pivot, I think. What is the ultimate reward for a modern teenager?
Right.
Because let's be honest, they aren't crossing swollen rivers to find a new tribe.
Yeah.
Based on these sources, the ultimate modern reward is social acceptance. And that introduces the single most dangerous multiplier for risky behavior.
Yes. Peers.
Right.
This is where we have to look at another major neurobiological change. And this one actually is directly linked to the rise in gonadal hormones at puberty, oxytocin.
Oxytocin, the cuddle hormone, we should talk about that with, like maternal bonding and holding a newborn.
We do, but it functions as a crucial neurotransmitter for all social memory and social bonding. At puberty, under the influence of those rising gonadal steroids, oxytocin receptors multiply rapidly in the brain's socio-emotional network.
Places like the amygdala.
Yes, the amygdala and the nucleus accumbens. This rapid multiplication hypersensitizes teenagers to social stimuli, to social feedback, and peer acceptance.
Oh.
It fundamentally changes how the brain weighs the value of a friend's opinion.
So they literally feel the presence and judgments of their friends more intensely on a neurochemical level than a child or an adult would.
Precisely. It's the reason adolescent risk-taking is almost exclusively a group activity, whether it's reckless driving, experimenting with substances, petty crime. Adolescents rarely do these things alone.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And to measure just how powerful this peer multiplier effect is, researchers conducted a really amazing study using a specialized video driving game inside a functional MRI machine.
Oh, I read about this.
Yeah.
Walk us through how this was set up, because the methodology here is just fascinating.
Okay, so researchers took 3 age groups. You had young adolescents averaging 14 years old, young adults averaging 20, and older adults averaging 34. They placed the subjects inside an fMRI scanner and had them play this computerized driving game. In the game, a traffic light turns yellow, and you know a solid wall is going to pop up soon.
What a classic risk-reward scenario.
Exactly. You get financial points for driving longer and pushing the limit, but you lose absolutely everything if you crash into the wall. It's a pure, calculated test of risk-taking. Stop and be safe, or keep going for the reward and risk a total crash.
Okay, so what happened when they played?
Well, when the subjects played the game completely alone, the 14-year-olds took the exact same number of risks as the 34-year-olds.
Wow.
Yeah. Their baseline behavior was identical. They weighed the risk, recognized the danger of the wall, and stopped the car.
Which perfectly validates the cold cognition theory we talked about earlier. When they are alone and calm, they know how to drive safely. They have the logic.
Yes. But then the researchers changed one variable. They brought two same-age friends into the room to watch the subject play through an intercom system.
Just to watch.
Just to watch. For the 34-year-olds, the presence of peers changed absolutely nothing about their driving or their brain activity. But for the 14-year-olds, just having their friends quietly observing caused them to take double the number of risks.
Double.
Double. They crashed constantly.
Wait, so the adult's behavior didn't change at all, but the teenager's risk doubled just because a friend was sitting quietly in the room. They weren't cheering them on or egging them on.
Nope. The mere presence of peers was enough. And the fMRI scans taken during those moments reveal exactly why. When peers were observing, the socio-emotional network in the adolescent brain lit up aggressively.
Oh, wow.
Just knowing their friends were watching activated the exact same neural reward circuitry as winning cold, hard cash.
So the friends are the reward. If the teenage brain is a sports car craving a fast drive, putting their friends in the passenger seat is literally like pouring rocket fuel directly into the engine.
That is exactly what is happening chemically. The social cachet of taking a risk in front of peers provides a dopamine hit so massive that it completely overrides the logical knowledge that they're about to crash into a wall.
Okay, so we've established that this emotional reward-seeking engine is revving, and it is heavily fueled by the mere presence of peers. But this brings up the most glaring question of all. Why doesn't the teenager just hit the brakes?
Right.
I mean, if they have adult-level logic, why don't they just stop?
To understand the brakes, we look at the structural insights from the University of Barcelona, specifically the work of David Bueno I. Torrens.
Okay.
He describes what he calls the triangle of adolescence. If you imagine a triangle in the brain, two corners are the socio-emotional network we've been discussing.
Which are what?
A hyperreactive amygdala generating intense emotional responses, and the striatum aggressively seeking dopamine rewards. These two centers are fully powered up and mature early in puberty.
And the third corner.
The prefrontal cortex. This is the brain's cognitive control center.
It's kind of the legal compliance department of the brain, responsible for executive functions like planning, reflecting, weighing long-term consequences, and inhibiting impulses.
There's a catch.
A massive one. The problem is a biological timeline mismatch. While the emotional and reward centers mature in early adolescence, the prefrontal cortex matures at a glacial pace. It doesn't finish its primary construction until the mid-20s.
So let's get a better metaphor for this, because we always hear, it's a sports car with no brakes, but it sounds more like a tech startup.
Okay, I like that.
You have an incredibly aggressive sales team, the amygdala and the striatum, who just got massive venture capital funding in the form of dopamine.
Right.
They are ready to close deals and take risks. But your legal compliance department, the prefrontal cortex, is still understaffed, working out of a temporary trailer in the parking lot. Sales is signing massive risky contracts before legal can even read the first page.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. And during adolescence, that legal department is undergoing two major disruptive structural renovations. The first is neural pruning. The brain is actively eliminating unused gray matter connections left over from childhood.
Wait, eliminating gray matter? I thought the whole point of the developing brain was to get more gray matter. Why is the brain actively destroying its own tissue?
Because more isn't always better, right? Efficiency is better. In childhood, the brain overproduces neural connections to absorb as much as possible. But by adolescence, it needs to specialize.
Okay.
Neural pruning is like clearing out the overgrown weeds in a forest to create a single, clear, high-speed pathway. By pruning away the unused gray matter, the brain is streamlining the entire system.
Okay, so pruning creates the clear path. What's the second renovation?
Myelination. The brain adds white matter, called myelin, which is a fatty insulation that wraps around the remaining nerve fibers. Think of it like wrapping copper wires in thick rubber insulation.
To protect the signal.
Exactly. It drastically speeds up the electrical transmissions and stops the signal from leaking out. But because pruning and myelination are a work in progress for over a decade, the prefrontal cortex temporarily loses efficiency.
So it's not that teenagers have zero self-control. It's not that the legal department doesn't exist at all.
No, they absolutely have self-control. As we saw in the driving game, when they are calm and alone, their cognitive control network regulates their behavior just fine.
Right.
What's fascinating here is that the issue is a lack of coordination between the cognitive brain and the emotional brain. The high-speed fiber optic cables between the prefrontal cortex and the subcortical regions are still being laid down.
Oh, I see.
So in the heat of the moment, when the amygdala is highly activated by peers, stress, or excitement, the emotional brain simply processes the signal faster. It bypasses the developing control center. They act before the prefrontal cortex has time to synchronize with the amygdala and send the message, wait, this is a terrible idea.
So if traditional education doesn't work because teenagers already know the risks, and if their brains are biologically hardwired to prioritize peer-fueled rewards over impulse control until they are 25, what can you actually do to protect the teenagers in your life?
Well, it requires a fundamental paradigm shift in how we approach parenting and policy. You must shift your strategy from trying to change how teenagers think to changing the context in which they act.
Change the context.
Yes. Since their internal regulatory system, that legal department, is still under construction, you have to provide external regulation. You minimize risks by controlling the environmental settings.
Okay, give us the real-world application of this. What does controlling the environment actually look like?
It means limiting the opportunities for an adolescent's immature judgment to have permanent, fatal consequences. On a public policy level, this means things like raising the driving age or implementing graduated licensing.
Because of the peer multiplier.
Right, because we know from the neurobiology that combining a teenage driver with teenage passengers is a biological recipe for disaster. It means strictly enforcing alcohol purchasing laws and significantly raising the price of cigarettes, which the data shows reduces teen smoking faster and more effectively than any educational pamphlet ever will.
Hold on, let me challenge this on a personal parenting level for a second.
Sure.
For the last 10 years, parents have been told that helicopter parenting and snowplow parenting are ruining kids. We're told we need to back off, let them fail, and let them face the natural consequences of their actions. Now you're saying we should control their environment and heavily monitor them. How is providing external regulation not just helicopter parenting?
It's a really vital distinction between scaffolding and suffocating.
Yeah.
Helicopter parenting is stepping in to solve every minor problem and preventing any emotional discomfort. Controlling the environment, in a neurobiological sense, means placing firm guardrails around life and death situations while still allowing freedom within those boundaries. You need robust parental monitoring, knowing where they are, who they are with, and what they are doing.
So you're stepping in for the missing brain parts.
Yes. You are acting as their surrogate prefrontal cortex when theirs goes offline. But the Barcelona research highlights a critical caveat here. Parents must protect teens from chronic stress.
Why is chronic stress the danger here?
Because of how chronic stress physically alters the brain. When a teenager feels overly controlled, constantly scrutinized, or pressured by extreme overprotection, their body initiates a toxic stress response.
Meaning cortisol.
Exactly. This floods the brain with cortisol, and cortisol actually degrades the neural pathways in the frontal lobes. It physically halts myelin production and damages the synapses in the prefrontal cortex.
Wait, so by stressing them out with constant hovering, you are actively sabotaging the construction of their cognitive control center.
Yes. You are making their already struggling prefrontal cortex even less efficient, which ironically leads to more emotional impulsivity when they finally do get a moment away from you.
That is wild.
Teenagers need the freedom to explore and make smaller, non-lethal mistakes so their brain can wire those pathways through lived experience. But they need the guardrails firmly in place to prevent catastrophes. Manage the environment, not the biology.
So what does this all mean? It means instead of trying to upgrade the car's brakes while it's speeding down the highway, your job as a parent is to keep the car off the icy roads in the first place.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
Let's quickly recap the journey we've been on. Adolescent risk-taking isn't a failure of logic, and it isn't sheer stupidity. It is a profound, mechanically driven mismatch in a developing brain.
Right.
You have an early maturing reward system that is flooding with dopamine and hypersensitized to social rewards by oxytocin. And that aggressive sales team is running far ahead of an understaffed, late-maturing prefrontal cortex that is literally undergoing a physical demolition and rebuilding process.
Yeah.
It just doesn't have the high-speed wiring yet to coordinate a stop signal in the heat of the moment.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the sources present a fascinating thought experiment. We tend to look at adolescent risk-taking as a public health crisis to be eradicated. But this sensation-seeking, this intense urge to break boundaries, challenge authority, and explore the unknown, it was the evolutionary necessity that allowed humans to survive and spread across the globe.
Right, because without it, we'd still be in the cave.
Exactly. Other mammals lose their intense curiosity once they exit infancy. Human adolescence intentionally extends that period of curious exploration.
So imagine if we possessed a magic pill, a medication that could instantly mature a teenager's prefrontal cortex at age 13. It would instantly synchronize their brain, give them adult impulse control, and entirely cure them of their risky, impulsive behavior. I mean, a lot of parents would probably empty their bank accounts for that pill.
They absolutely would. But if we force that early maturation, would we accidentally extinguish the biological engine of human curiosity?
No.
By eliminating the chaotic risk-taking, we might destroy the neurological foundation for exploration, creativity, and innovation that defines us as a species.
We need that messy, chaotic, risky period to build a brilliant, innovative adult. Well, thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. As you go forward, we encourage you to look at the teenagers in your life, not as broken adults and not as faulty machines lacking logic, but as brilliant, developing minds doing exactly what nature intended. Keep them off the icy roads, put up the guardrails, but let them build that incredible brain. We'll see you next time.